Drop lower like that. That's good. That's good. Okay. Maybe even a drop. Okay. I'm someone who works in TV. You see me on Al Jazeera all the time, so. Okay, that's good.
Good. It's a bit of infection, but
just tighten it a little bit. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out on a Sunday afternoon, especially on Mother's Day. So, obviously, I have to begin. These were going to be for Rabbi Goldman, but I decided instead to give them to my own wife, mother of 9 children, thank God. But these flowers, they may look a little bit inadequate, but I have to thank the island of Kauai in general and Walmart in particular, because this is what I discovered. This is what I love about Kauai. If you go to Walmart, as you leave today after you buy something, they give you 1 flower for free because it's Mother's Day. So I said to myself, wow, if I go in and out and buy a bunch of things, then I'll be able to give my wife. So I actually got these. This is a gift from Walmart and the Walton family to my wife, Debbie. And I've never seen that before, where you actually can get free flowers. So next Mother's Day, just to save a couple of bucks, I'm going to fly into Kauai again. And I'm going to buy, a couple of little odds and ends at Walmart. And Debbie, these are yours. Please don't forget them. They're so beautiful, right? Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Rabbi Michael Goldman is my dear friend. I am 58 years old, thank God, and I really believe in the truth, that we have to always state the truth. So and my favorite Talmudic expression, I shared this with Lee and with Kathy on Friday, my favorite Talmudic expression, I thank you so much for your hospitality. God bless you both. And more importantly, thank you for your t-shirt, which I'll be stealing from you before this speech is over. I really should wear that while I give this speech. It's an amazing speech. Yeah. Let's. I will literally take the shirt off your back. I was telling Lee and Kathy, my favorite Talmudic expression is that words that emanate from the heart penetrate the heart. I really love that. You can't fake sincerity. This is a age of fake news, true news, partisanship. There's 2 truths. I'm going to try to state the truth. So the first truth I want to state today is Rabbi Michael Goldman is what we in Chabad call a shliach. He is a rabbi's rabbi. He is someone that the global Chabad community looks up to. Up until recently, he actually produced this weekly scholarly compilation of Torah study that was disseminated throughout the entire Chabad world. I mean, in every country, from South Africa, from where he's from, and where his father is one of the most distinguished leaders till today. I've spoken at his father's synagogue in Sydenham. My own son is in one of our 9 children. Our youngest son is studying rabbinical ordination in Pretoria, South Africa right now. It's a country that finds the state of Israel a little bit challenging on a governmental level. But of course, the Jewish community was at the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement, including Rabbi Goldman's father. But this is a very special man. And so it's my honor to be his guest, because a rabbi should be known above all else, not just as a scholar, Rabbi Goldman is, but as a gentleman, what we call a mensch. And he's a mensch's mensch. And you're all very fortunate to have him. And I truly hope that everyone will get behind the Jewish Center of Kauai and Chabad of Kauai in terms of financial support, in terms of turning out for the events, in terms of getting behind Rabbi Goldman and his Rebbitzin and making sure that on this incredible island, where if you tunnel directly, you literally get to the land of Israel. That's how we're planning to visit we have a son who's in the IDF. He was redrafted. He's in a war zone right now. Our eldest son, Mendy, God bless him. These are the true heroes. Kathy and Lee also have a son who served in the IDF. But we have 4 kids who served in the IDF, but our son was just called back. He's been in Gaza. He's been in Lebanon. I don't want to say where he is now, but God should keep him safe. So as soon as this thing is over, that's why I went to Walmart. I bought a shovel, and we're going to be tunneling directly to visit our son, save a couple of bucks. And this way I get 1 more flower. It all comes together. It's a little story. Popes have been in the news. My wife and I last month were in the Vatican for 5 straight days. I was there to lead Jewish prayers and a Jewish delegation for the health of Pope Francis. I met Pope Francis, had an audience with Pope Francis and with Pope Benedict. We now bless our first American Pope, Pope Leo. But I wanted to really show the Jewish community's appreciation for Pope Francis, who's been extremely vocal. Allah Shalom, may he rest in peace. He's very vocal about anti-Semitism. On Israel, he had more of of a controversial attitude, but on condemnation of anti-Semitism. So my wife and I spent time with the global second in charge of the global Catholic Church, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who was supposed to. They said he was going to be the Pope. I was waiting for the announcement, and it turned out to be an American Pope, which is a great blessing. But I do have to tell one story about the great Pope Francis. Okay, so the story comes. He only visited the United States once, 2015. So the Pope arrives at JFK Airport. Everyone's there to greet him. But what was not known about Pope Francis is that he actually loved to drive. Did you know this? He loved to drive. He was from Buenos Aires. He was a Jesuit. He really believed in being very low key. So they have this big giant white limo for him, papal colors, and he says to the driver, "You out!" And the driver goes to the back, and the Pope starts zooming down I-95, down to Jersey Turnpike near where we live, but he doesn't know the American speed limit. He's doing like 200 miles an hour within a few minutes. A state trooper is right behind him, and zooms, they pull him over. And the state trooper, I'm going to put this guy in jail. It's freaking 200 miles an hour. Chutzpah. And these big limo, these arrogant rich people. So the state trooper knocks on the window, and the Pope lowers the window, Pope Francis, and he says to him, "You, give me your driver's license registration." And the Pope used to keep his driver's license right inside his white cassock, of course, so he pulls out his identification, and he gives it to the state trooper, who turns the papal colors completely white. And he says, "Wait just a moment." He rushes back to his police car and says, "Give me the superintendent of all state New Jersey police." And they say, "He's busy." This is we have an international, global situation here. Get him on the phone. So they said, "No, not even bigger. Give me the governor of New Jersey." So they put Governor Chris Christie on the phone. And he says, it's a Sunday afternoon. He said, "Governor, sir, we have a real serious diplomatic situation. This guy driving 200 miles an hour should be put in jail, but he's a VIP." He says, "Who is he?" He says, "He's big. You have no idea. This guy's big." And Governor Christie says, "Stop beating around the bush. Who did you stop? Who was driving so fast?" He says, "Governor, this is going to rock America's relations. This is headline news." He said, "Tell me who it is, finally. Who is this VIP?" He says, "Listen, I have no idea who's in this car. But whoever he is, he's got the Pope as a driver." Okay? That's a true story. We were just in the Vatican. By the way, I was at all the prayers with the yarmulke for Pope Francis. They were very moving, actually. And I hope that Pope Leo, raised in Chicago, will become a great friend of Israel. I've always wondered, and this is one of we met with Archbishop Paul Gallagher. He's from Liverpool. He's the third in charge of the Global Catholic Church. He's the foreign minister. In the Vatican, Secretary of State does not connote foreign ministry. That's here in the United States. Secretary of State really is like the Prime Minister of the Catholic Church. That's Cardinal Pietro Parolin. But the foreign minister is Cardinal Gallagher. We were talking so much, and I said to him, I really just don't get our evangelical Christian brothers and sisters just acknowledge so forthrightly what the Bible says, which is that God gifted the land of Israel to the Jewish people eternally. It's just in black and white. It's one of the reasons why President Trump is so staunchly pro-Israel. It's not only the fact that he has an Orthodox Jewish daughter and Orthodox Jewish grandchildren who go to the school that I went to in Miami Beach, Florida, the Hebrew Academy of Greater Miami. It's largely because President Trump's base is evangelical, and the evangelical Christians believe that they are blessed through Israel, and they state forthrightly, as our new ambassador to Jerusalem, former Governor Mike Huckabee, whose show I used to appear on all the time when he was on TV, that the Jewish people have this biblical gift. Why doesn't the Catholic Church acknowledge it? And I'm going back to the Vatican. We're going to be working on that, God willing. How is it that the Jewish people have this question mark over their head always, as if we have no place where we belong? Who would have thought that we would need a security guard in Kauai, Hawaii? In Kauai. I mean, are the monk seals going to attack us? I mean, is it the tortoises? This is Hawaii. I just came from Australia. My wife was born in Sydney, raised in Sydney. My father-in-law is not feeling well. My father-in-law is a very righteous man, about to have his 82nd birthday. He built the second largest synagogue in all of Sydney, Australia, called the South End Synagogue. I was a student there from the age of 19 to 21. My wife's saying this, what you're seeing before you, essentially a sample of masculine physical perfection. And she pursued me relentlessly, stalked me actually, and we got married. And I have to tell you, and by the way, the Mother's Day really is, it's the appetizer for the real day, which is Father's Day. It's like that's the main course. I treat Mother's Day as like pre-Father's Day, essentially. Because it's the dad, come on. So, when I was a student in Australia was famous for the chillest vibe, shrimp on the barbie, mate. This time, when I went to speak at Central Synagogue, the biggest shul in all of Australia, there were 6 security guards, and I'm the scholar in residence speaking that night to hundreds of people who are questioning me. And I said, I'm about to give a speech. If you really think I'm a threat, maybe you shouldn't have invited me. I was attacked 3 times publicly in Sydney, Australia. In the main speech I gave, 2 people were arrested, for those of you who saw it. Arrested in Sydney. Australia has become a sewer of anti-Semitism. On October 9th, they had hundreds of people chanting in the most famous building, the most famous architectural edifice in the Southern Hemisphere, the Sydney Opera House, chanting openly, "Gas the Jews! Gas the Jews!" And not one person was arrested. In Australia, let alone in Times Square, where I've been attacked and my life has been threatened constantly because I'm recognized as a defender of Israel. Do you know that Jews today are becoming the Illuminati? We're disappearing. The mezuzahs are coming off our doors. The Magen Davids are being hidden. Yarmulkes. There are Hasidim with long pants. Their tzitzis out, walking through. Times Square has essentially become a battleground. That's why we do our giant events in Times Square. We just had, thank God, an Algerian American named Flo Groberg, who turned 42 on the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, which was, how many days ago? 3 days ago? He won the Medal of Honor in Afghanistan. He's a truly great man. I met him at the 80th commemorations of D-Day. I go every 5 years, and I love the American military. That's one of the reasons I love Hawaii, because, as Rabbi Goldman said the other day, Kauai is the front line of defense for the United States, right? So, we had Flo Groberg speak on October 7th to 5,000 pro-Israel. He's not Jewish. He's married to a Jewish woman. Is that, what was that? Is this like... One second, no. They found us. All the anti-Israel people, I knew they'd find us somehow. They found us. We are becoming the Illuminati. And by the way, there's 2 kinds of holocausts. Is the physical decimation of the Jewish people that we witnessed between 1941 and 1945, where, it's hard to even imagine this, 10,000 Jews were murdered every single day for 4 years. These are numbers that are incalculable. To give you an idea of what the Holocaust was, when the United States was attacked on September 11, 2001, I'll never forget that day. I'll never forget seeing the smoke rise from Ground Zero. The United States went to war for 20 years in Afghanistan when 3,000 Americans and some international citizens were killed. And went to war for 15 years in Iraq. We Jews had 3 9/11s a day for 4 years. We had 3 Pearl Harbors a day for 4 years. In President Trump's first administration, we gave him a book printed by a good friend of mine named Elon Greenfield. He runs, he's my publisher in Israel. I'm getting old, I'm getting senior moments. What's the name? Geffen. He produced a book and we gave it to President Trump as a gift in Las Vegas. He spoke on a Shabbos. The book is this thick. You know what it is? It's one word. It's the word Jew in 9-point type, 9.5, 6 million times, and it's this thick. There is no other word in that book except the word Jew. That's one kind of decimation of the Jewish people. But the 2 greatest calamities that have befallen our people since the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 of the Common Era by the Roman Emperor Vespasian and his son Titus, who was only 24 years old at the time, And of course, till today, Jews have the custom of not walking under the Arch of Titus, which was built for his victory parade, where they killed Shimon bar Youre. The Romans were very brutal. They would, of course, take the leaders of the rebellion. So Titus had his parade, and then they killed Shimon bar Youre and that's where we have the picture of the menorah, and Jews have this custom never to walk under. I found that out because I kept on walking under to take pictures, and all these Jews were flabbergasted. Rabbi Shmuley, you don't know. Now, the Roman antiquities, they've closed it off. So you can't even walk under. But the two greatest calamities since the destruction of the Second Temple was the Holocaust. And before that, of course, it was the Spanish Inquisition, the Spanish expulsion. Now, 6 million Jews. There were only 18 million at the time. After the Holocaust, we were left with 12 million Jews. How many are there in the world today? If you ask any non-Jew, how many Jews are in the world? I asked my non-Jews friends all the time. They said, we know, very small, not a lot of Jews. Not more than 400 million. Like, laugh. No, it can't be more than 400 million, very small. There are 14 million Jews in the world, right? We were 12 million. Well, we were 18 million in 1939. Then we were 12 million at the end of the war, and we've barely grown. So that's one kind of decimation, Holocaust. But there's a second kind. There were 500,000 Jews in Spain before the expulsion and before the Inquisition. Half of them left. They went to Portugal. Then they were kicked out of Portugal because Ferdinand and Isabella wanted to marry their daughter off to the King Manuel III of Portugal, and they only had one condition. The disgusting anti-Semites, Ferdinand and Isabella, that he had to kick out his Jews as well. He kicked them out in 1503. But hundreds of thousands of Jews remained in Spain. Where are their children today? Where are they? They weren't gassed. They weren't shot by the Einsatzgruppen. They didn't die of typhoid. One Holocaust is the physical destruction of a people. That's what we call genocide. It's a term that was coined by a great man named Raphael Lemkin, who was a lawyer who survived the Holocaust. And he created the word genocide. Geno means ethnicity. Side means mass murder, the mass murder of an ethnicity. That's why when all this by the way, that's why that even if, God forbid, it were true that Israel was enacting a genocide in Gaza, which of course is one of the great blood libels of our time, but even if that were true, it would still not be technically a genocide, because a genocide is where you seek to extinguish an entire... So unless Israel goes and kills all the 1.9 million Muslims who my sons fight and their friends have died to protect the Muslim Arab citizens of Israel who live in Haifa, who live in Nazaret, who live in Yaffo, it's not a genocide, technically. You can call it mass murder, God forbid. Of course, Israel's guilty of neither. We'll talk about that. But people don't even know what the word genocide means. That came from Raphael Lemkin. So, and he's the one who got the United Nations in 1948, 1949 to pass the UN Genocide Convention, to which the United States only became a signatory in 1951. And by the way, whenever you declare a genocide, you're automatically, that convention says that all countries have to go to war to stop the genocide. It just shows you they don't even believe that Israel, God forbid, engaged in a genocide. I'll tell you, China really is engaged in a genocide against the Uyghurs. I can talk about others, but that's one form of extinction. But the other form of extinction is all these Spanish Jews, you know why they disappeared? Invisibility is annihilation. The moment you stop wearing a yarmulke, the moment your tzitzis are gone, the moment your Magen Davids are ripped off, the moment your mezuzahs, we have good friends. I lived for 2 years in Australia. My wife grew up there. My wife's whole family lives there. We have good friends, proud Jews, who visit Israel, who've now put their mezuzahs on the inside of their home in Sydney, Australia. And for those of you who follow me on social media, and if you don't, you have no idea what you're missing. You have to see what was happening to me in Sydney and how I was being attacked. Everywhere I went. Sydney, Australia. And now Kauai, Hawaii. We have a security guard packing heat in Kauai, Hawaii to protect the Jews. That is not normal, my friends. And that's what I want to address today. It's Mother's Day. You see, from time immemorial, there have always been two energies in the world. Every religion, every philosophical idea, every mystical idea connotes this divergence, the masculine and the feminine. We see it in marriage, men and women. By the way, we see it even in same-sex couples. I often counsel Jewish and non-Jewish same-sex couples. There's usually someone who's maybe a little bit more feminine, a little bit more masculine. What do we mean by masculine and feminine? The masculine is aggressive. It's often domineering. It's the first commandment that God gave Adam, that you have to work and toil the Garden of Eden in order to gain mastery over the earth. That's the masculine side of our lives. Competitive, capitalist. But if you don't have Shabbos, if you go through 6 days of the week, and if it's not balanced by the feminine, raw masculinity that is not balanced by the feminine is actually grotesque. It's pornographic, it's disgusting. Like all this pornography you see on... I love when people say to me, oh, women also love pornography. I don't know. From my own experiences, based on speaking to friends, of course. That was a joke, by the way. From my own experience... See, what is pornography? Pornography essentially is the abuse of the feminine for just to indulge nothing but the male libido. There's nothing loving, there's nothing soft, there's nothing nurturing. And there's actually nothing interesting about it. It's actually quite boring. I debated Larry Flint. This is the craziest story. You know, me, Roseanne Barr, and Larry Flint had a debate in front of 3,000 people. I think there's video of it. You could certainly hear the whole audio online as soon as this is over. And I'm debating Larry Flint, who I became friendly with. Biggest pornographer in the world. He married his nurse, and I was very impressed. He married his nurse. She was his age. And he was very devoted, didn't cheat on her, and he wrote about that. And so I tried to meet him, and then I challenged him to a public debate. First it was on Fox News, and then we did it live. And I said, you know what, Larry? The biggest argument against pornography is that it's just so boring. He started to laugh. He said, boring? He said, Rabbi, that's why I'm a billionaire and you're not. There's nothing boring about it. I make billions of dollars off porn. I said, really? If porn is not boring, then explain one thing to me, Larry. This is the time he had Hustler magazine, how many models do you pay to be your playmate of the month or whatever it is, whatever they call it in that particular magazine? He said, what do you mean, one a month, 12? I said, wait a second. A smart businessman will pay one woman and just reprint the pictures 12 different times, right? Why would you? He said, then no one would buy it. I said, but why? He said, because they want to see something new. I said, oh! So it is boring. So overexposure of the human body. So pornography can only exist in vast quantity, which is why if you click one link, you get 30,000 other links. Or again, so my friends tell me, I've never had this experience myself. Raw masculinity that is not tempered by the feminine is ugly. And it's dangerous. And the world is going through a profoundly masculine time. It's scary. You know, Islam used to have a much stronger feminine component that was academic, scholarly, embracing. We Jews benefited from it. When we were kicked out of Spain in 1492, Portugal 1503, you know where we went? We went to our Muslim brothers and sisters. They took us in. That's why there's Jewish communities in Istanbul till this very day. Justin is Kurdish. We were talking about Erdogan. Erdogan destroyed all of that. What does Erdogan represent? Erdogan represents the new form of Islamic masculinity. That Islam is great, not because it has great universities, nurturing, academic, raising students, inviting in, Erdogan follows me everywhere I go, by the way, and I am scared of him, by the way. Erdogan is all about, you're not going to humiliate Islam. Competitive. That's what Hamas is. You're not going to humiliate. Do you ever notice that there isn't one famous female Muslim in the entire world, with the exception of poor Malala, and who became famous because she was shot in the head at 16 because she wanted to go to school? Where are the female Islamic leaders? They don't exist. They once existed. The first university in the history of the world was started by an Islamic woman named Fatima in Morocco in the 8th century. Could you even imagine a female lecturer being allowed to speak these days in a mosque? When Hamas attacked Israel, notice, they didn't just want to kill Jews. Their foremost objective was masculine aggression that would desecrate and defile the feminine. They didn't have a Mother's Day. They bragged and they insisted on gang rape and the desecration of the feminine. They went after these women in order to show they could defile them, and then kill them. I don't want to go through all the stories. They're too horrible. This is from the New York Times, by the way. The New York Times, of course, did a deep dive. They were taking women from the Nova Festival and they were cutting off their breasts and playing ball with them. From the New York Times. You want to kill someone, shoot him in the head. This was about total defiling and the desecration. And why? Oh, you Jews think that you actually struck a blow against Islam? We have the great armies. You carved out this tiny little country, 77 years. That's nothing in the span of what we can create as masculine Islamist, not Islam, I'll get to Islam in a moment, masculine Islamist aggression. The way they see it, there was a Christian kingdom in the same place between the year 1098 and 1177. In 1098, Pope Urban II called the First Crusade. The Christians got together from all over Europe. They went and defeated the Muslims, and they established a Christian kingdom with King Baldwin as their head. He was a leper, by the way. He wore a gold mask. There's great movies about him. And then Sultan Saladin came back, defeated, and that was the end. And that's what many Islamists think will happen with Israel today. 87 years is how long the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem lasted, until it was destroyed. But notice that Saladin, whose greatest teacher and personal physician, meaning he trusted him with his life, was the most famous rabbi that ever lived, with the exception of Moses. And that was Moses Maimonides. Saladin had a very, yes, he was a warrior, but he balanced it with this very feminine, nurturing instinct. The first thing he did when he conquered Jerusalem is he told all the Jews, "You're welcome back." The Crusaders killed every last Jew in Jerusalem. By the way, according to the chroniclers, the blood of Jews and Muslims in Jerusalem, when it was conquered in the First Crusade, was running up to the knees of the horses. Saladin invited them all back. And then you had the golden age of Jewish, Spanish, Islamic brotherhood in Spain. You have to remember, we only know who Plato is today, and Socrates, and Sophocles, and all the great Greek thinkers because of the Muslims. The Christians in the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, they burned all their books. These were pagan philosophers. They were all destroyed. It was the Muslims who translated them from Greek into Arabic, and later Arabic, by the time Christianity catches up in the Renaissance, back into Latin and then into English, etc. Islam once cultivated this more feminine, nurturing energy. There's a masculine and feminine within each and every one of us. There are times when I'm very competitive. If someone's in the same field as me and they sell more books, like in relationships, I wrote Kosher Sex, I wrote Kosher Jesus, then part of you might get a little bit jealous. Part of me that might be a little bit insecure. Then there's a part of me that is actually happy for other people in the same field, that wants to see them prosper, that will facilitate their growth. We feel that masculine, feminine tension, and there has to be that balance. That's why Shabbat is so important that it be observed. It's so important. You know, my wife and I were driving here. I was on the phone with my very dear friend, Nissim Luke. Nissim Luke, unfortunately, has the distinction of having a child who's the most famous victim of October 7th. His daughter is Sheni Luke. She was the first victim whose pictures appeared on October 7th. You will remember famously that she's the beautiful German-Israeli woman who was put on the back of a pickup truck with 11 monsters beating her body. Her hair was all matted. Her parents still thought she was alive. Israel thought she was alive for weeks. You saw the picture. I knew she wasn't alive. I saw the picture the second Chabad ended. And last year, on my mother's yard site, I lost my mother 2 years ago, we dedicated a Torah. Robert Kennedy Jr. was the main speaker. We dedicated a Torah to Shani Luke. We have a beautiful Torah with her dancing, because she loved to dance. She was a tattoo artist. And her mother is an Orthodox Jewish convert from Germany. And I interviewed her mother with Robert Kennedy in front of thousands of people. And I said, she's an incredible woman. I said, do you regret your decision? Her name is Ricarda. I said, Ricky, do you regret? You could have lived in Germany, one of the richest country in Europe. Now you have a dead daughter because you can't do it. And she said, you should watch it. We all had tears in our eyes. She said, the Jewish people are my people. Israel is my home. And then I said, and then I asked her, how do you feel? The IDF had announced 3 days before the Torah that they killed half of those guys. Now they're all dead, thank God. At that time, half of those thugs in the back of the... And she had no vengeance in her heart. I said, how do you feel the IDF telling you they've killed some of those terrorists? And by the way, there were like 10 guys. Half of them weren't even Hamas terrorists. They were hangers-on who ran from Gaza into... You know that happened, right? There were 1,800 Hamas fighters on October 7th. The rest were just hangers-on who ran in. A lot of them bragging. You remember that famous phone call? Dad, I'm here. I just killed 10 Jews. That wasn't a Hamas terrorist. Remember he used the grandmother's phone, put it on her Facebook thing? Those were just guys living in Gaza. And Ricky says, Shmuley, I don't care what happens to them. I focus on my daughter. Well, I care. I hate them. I'm so happy that Israel eliminated them. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls. And I don't believe in rejoicing when these people die. But I do believe it gives me a sense of justice and satisfaction that these people cannot slaughter, murder, and rape other women. But the world is comprised of the masculine and the feminine. So Nissim, look, he's not the most Orthodox Jew in the world, but he doesn't drive on Shabbat. And he said to me, why? It's because he comes to New York a lot. He's about to speak for my father. My father's 5th yahrzeit falls out this year, May 28th, and he's a speaker in Times Square, God willing. And he doesn't drive on Shabbat. And he said to me, Shmuel, I'll tell you why. They live on a beautiful little moshav, he said, because then there's no Shabbat. There's no time for family. There's no time for community. When we drive on Shabbat, when we put on the TV on Shabbat, when we get distracted by all the noise of the world on Shabbat, there's no feminine to balance the masculine. And that's when relationships fall apart. My fear for my Muslim brothers and sisters is that there's no feminine energy that is balancing Islam today. The feminine has been completely silenced. Many Muslims want to have it back, but they're afraid. You know how many Muslims have stopped me on this trip? You can see it again on my Instagram, and they want to talk to me. They all watch me, and they all stop me. They stop me in Australia. Some attack me, but some are the ones here, the Muslims here, the Arabs that I met here in Kauai, were very respectful, but they won't show their face because they're afraid they'll be killed by their own community speaking to Rabbi Shmuley. It's really sad. They all want to see a different form of Islam, but they can't speak up because the masculine guys will kill them. Why do you think you see when these... So I go to Oxford University. I was the rabbi there for 11 years. 6 weeks ago, my wife and I'm debating Cenk Uyghur, for those of you who know him. So Cenk Cenk is an Israel hater. But the interesting thing about Cenk Uyghur, who has tens of millions of followers, is that he actually calls his podcast, which is one of the biggest in the world, Young Turks. Do you know who the Young Turks were? There were 4 major genocides in the 20th century. The first was the Armenians. Between 1.8 to 2.8 million killed by the Ottoman Turks and by Enver Pasha, the Young Turk. Then the Holocaust, biggest genocide in the history of the world, 6 million killed in 4 years. Then there was Cambodia, 1.8 million killed from 1975 to 1978. Then there was the Rwandan genocide, where I'm very involved. I've taken my family to Rwanda probably 10 times. I'm very close to President Paul Kagame. He gave me the great honor of, I was the keynote speaker at the 20th anniversary of the commemoration of the Rwandan genocide at Amahoro National Stadium in Kigali. And the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, is there, and it gave me the opportunity to unload on the UN because the UN did nothing to stop the genocides. That was the fastest murder in the history of the world. 330 people killed with a machete, low-tech killing, not gas chambers. You have to imagine how much work had to be done. 330 killed every hour. The fastest mass murder before that was the murder of my wife's families, Slovakian, Hungarian, and Romanian Jews, 550,000 killed between April and July of 1944. That's when Auschwitz really was. When we speak about Auschwitz, 1 million Jews killed, they were almost all in 1944, Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia. And my wife's great uncle, Soli Wiesner, to whom I dedicated a book, was murdered there. He was 23 years old. He's actually in the rolls of those murdered. When you think at the kind of slaughter and mass murder that's taken place in our world, you begin to ask, where are the nurturers? in this world today that is so angry and so militant and so divisive that we can't even talk to each other. Does anyone here, I could not be more proud of my 2 sons who served in the IDF and we're in the war right now, and 1 son who's back in the war right now. So it's a tough time for me and my wife this past Shabbos, amidst the beauty that we were able to experience here. Then my daughter-in-law, my son, who's in an elite combat unit, my son Yosef, married 10 days after October 7th. We didn't cancel the wedding. I performed the wedding. Iron Dome, missiles overhead. This was a surreal chuppah. Surreal. Everyone said cancel. I said Hamas does not dictate whether Jewish. The real answer to October 7th is more Jewish babies, more Israeli babies. We're not a proselytizing faith because we don't believe that people are not good enough the way they're born. We don't believe that Christians aren't going to heaven. We don't believe that Muslims aren't going. We believe that anyone who leads a righteous life is going to heaven. We're not a proselytizing faith. So we rely mostly on our birth rate. So we didn't cancel the wedding. My daughter-in-law, Dahlia, is a social worker in the IDF. Now she's finished her IDF service. The week of her wedding, she did not spend time with the tailor fixing her dress or the makeup artist. She arranged 70 funerals. 70 funerals for IDF soldiers. But with all of that, no, but I have to tell you, you said at the beginning that Rabbi Shmuley may be controversial and that you don't agree with everything I may say, correct? So I just want you to know. So I want you to know, Michal, that but I wanted to say publicly, as a rejoinder, because he's right, that this is a democracy, the United States of America, and I completely respect Rabbi Michal's right to be wrong. So with all of that, 3 kids in the IDF, a daughter-in-law in the IDF, and they're my greatest heroes. People always say to me, "Oh, Shmuley, you're so brave." Really? I'm brave behind, my iPhone or the speeches. My sons are my heroes. My daughter-in-law is my hero. Your son is a hero. But do you really think that this is what the Jews really want to be doing with their time? King David was the greatest Jewish warrior of all time. He's not remembered as a warrior, though. He's remembered as a guy who had a harp and a lyre and sang a new song to the Lord. Pope Leo said in his first homily that he wants his whole papacy dedicated to, quote, singing a new song to the Lord. That's straight from King David. We don't want to be warriors. The IDF is a reluctant army. We have no glory in military victories. Let me just prove it. Do you remember how Anwar Sadat was killed in 1981 after making peace with Israel? He took a giant piece of Israel. I'd love to see the pyramids. I just think it's a one-way trip for me with a yarmulke, so I'm probably not going to see them anytime soon. But does everyone remember how Anwar Sadat? I was a teenager. I remember it like it was yesterday. He was at a military parade celebrating his victory over Israel 8 years earlier in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, his victory. Of course, Ariel Sharon had encircled the entire Egyptian Third Army, and then Henry Kissinger, who I have to say he just died at 100. We don't speak evil, bad of the dead, but he really was a traitor to his people, and he was a Holocaust survivor. I don't know what he was thinking with all that stuff about Israel, but that's for another lecture. Anwar Sadat was killed at a military victory parade. And then when the American troops marched into Baghdad, you remember Saddam Hussein's arms? They were literally modeled on his arms, those giant arms. Let me ask you one question. Israel had a great victory in 1948, 1956, 1967, one of the greatest military, most electrifying in the history of the world. 1973, ultimately. Here's the question. Who here has visited Israel? Okay. The rest of you got to go. Much prettier than Kauai. This place is a dump. Has anyone ever seen a single monument, arch, statue, equestrian statue, anything, to a Jewish, not just Israeli, I'm talking going all the way back to time of the Maccabees, to a Jewish military victory ever? Has anyone ever seen it? Just name where it is. Like if you go to Rome, that's all you see. Constantine's Arch, Arch of Titus. I can go through all of them. I love antiquity. The Greeks, the whole Iliad is about Odysseus and the destruction of Troy and the giant wooden horse. Do you realize that we never celebrate military victories? Hanukkah is the most public of all Jewish holidays. The Rebbe made it such. That's why you see the menorah like that. Hanukkah, we don't even celebrate the military victory. We celebrate the fact that the Jews, having defeated the Assyrian Greeks, were able to be religious again and light the menorah. We never celebrate military victories because we only ever fight IDF. We only fight defensive battles to protect and preserve life. There is no glory in Judaism at winning a war. We're not a masculine nation. We're a profoundly feminine nation. That's why God is described in the Torah as the Shekhinah. The feminine presence, the nurturing presence. The God with the sword and all that's the Jupiter and Apollo. That's not our God. Our God is the God whose commandment to Avram was bring in guests and have a tent with no doors. Don't lock anyone out, which is why till today we marry under a chuppah. We rebuild that tent of Abraham that has no walls. Can you imagine a nation that celebrates as their patriarch, not George Washington, who defeats the British at Yorktown? Our Avram is celebrated for being a cook, a caterer. I mean, is there much glory in that? You're kidding, right? I mean, the Romans have Romulus and Remus, and the Greeks have Achilles, and we have this guy shechting lambs to feed a bunch of, passers-by, and he washes their feet. And that's why Christianity, in its earliest form, the Jewish Jesus, which is why I wrote Kosher Jesus, building theological bridges between our Christian brothers and sisters, and today Christians are the greatest friends the state of Israel could have. I wish that the Jews were as supportive of Israel as the evangelicals. I wish. But Christianity started in a very feminine way. And Jesus was not a warrior. And Jesus, the beautiful Sermon on the Mount, and I show in my book, Kosher Jesus, Jesus was a Pharisaic rabbi. He didn't know what Christianity was. Jesus kept Shabbat. There's only one time in the New Testament that his followers break Shabbat. He justifies it saying that they were being pursued by the Romans who were going to kill them. Jesus famously says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 18, that any one of his followers who doesn't keep every tiny little crown, a tag it's called, not just keep every letter of the Torah, but even the little crowns of the Torah, Chumrah, will be the least in the kingdom of heaven. I mean, St. Paul later says, okay, well, Jesus died and therefore fulfilled it. Well, that's Paul's opinion. That's okay. But that's not what Jesus said. Christianity starts as a very feminine religion. And they're victims. They're like the Jews. They're being killed by lions at the Colosseum and attacked. Only later does Christianity abort this feminine spiritual posture like Judaism and become a very aggressive militaristic religion. And that's where it falls into terrible corruption. Julius II, the warrior pope, who actually went out into battle. He's the one who built the beautiful Sistine Chapel. He's the one who got Michelangelo to decorate it. So it kind of worked out because till today we all want to see the movie Conclave. Did you hear that Pope Leo actually watched Conclave 2 days before his election? That was his brother revealed that at Scott. It's amazing. And now we see Christianity has reverted back. You have a new pope who says, I want to welcome in the poor, like Abraham. I want to be an apostolic church. I want to be a missionary. I want to bring the word of God. No more kill people and slaughter them, etc., etc. And that's why we see Christianity having jettisoned that corruption as it returns to a more nurturing religion. But not, sadly, right now, Islam. Because Islam today, which I showed you, had a very strong maternal, one of Muhammad's wives was Jewish. He had a Jewish wife. We now see the militants having taken over completely. And we now live with Islamism, which is not a religion. Islamism is not Islam. Islamism is the Muslim Brotherhood. It is a political genocidal ideology that masks its corruption with a thin veneer of Islam. And my confusion is why my Muslim brothers and sisters have no issue with these animals being their ambassadors. You know, I debated Cenk Uyghur at Oxford, as I was speaking about before. And so we've debated in front of millions of people on Piers Morgan like 4 or 5 times. Now we're debating face to face. And I said, I'm going to win this debate in a single second. See, the problem with debates is that there's 2 truths. Only seldomly can you find an unassailable argument in a debate where you win the debate because there's just no rejoinder. Let me just give you an example. This is a great example, right? I think. Throughout the Cold War, there was a debate. Who had the correct political system? Was it the capitalists or the communists? We debate that till today. China is trying to overtake the United States as the world's biggest economy. Most Israelis, when they finish the IDF, they go to places like India, and they always go to Vietnam, which is still communist till today. So America said, what kind of debate? You guys are tyrannical, secret police, KGB, NKVD. You guys are freaking monsters and animals. And then Khrushchev, who was very smart, comes back and says, oh, really? We don't have like dogs biting black children in Birmingham, Alabama, and we don't have truncheons being used against freedom riders who just want to take a bus, and we don't tell Rosa Parks to go to the back of the... Those are good points. Do you know that Elie Wiesel was liberated by a black... Elie Wiesel was my mentor, my hero. He died on the 2nd of July, 2016. Do you know that he was liberated by a black soldier in Patton's Third Army in Buchenwald? And we just celebrated the 80th anniversary of that last month. A black soldier. We found the family of that soldier, by the way. They live in Philadelphia. We found his children. Those same soldiers came back and were treated like crap in this great country. That was the communist argument. It has validity. The rejoinder was, okay, America's imperfect. We're trying to work out our race issues. But come on, we don't have secret police and all this other stuff. Then one man made an unassailable argument that ended the debate forever. His name was John F. Kennedy, and it was probably his greatest speech. It was in Berlin, 1963, just 4 months before he would be felled by an assassin's bullet on the 22nd of November, 1963, and he famously said, we're all debating communism, capitalism. He's saying this right to the Soviets. He's right at the Berlin Wall, which was built in his presidency. It was kind of a failure of his presidency that he allowed it to be built. And he famously said, what was his argument? He said, we never had to build a wall to keep our people in. If you guys are so wonderful, then why do you have to cage your citizens who all want to get the hell out? Game over. End of the debate. The Berlin Wall was proof positive that communism sucks. So what's that unassailable argument for Israel? It's simple. That's what I said to Cenk Uygur at Oxford 6 weeks ago. I said, Cenk, let's say I admit for a moment, you're right. All the problems in the Middle East stem from Israel. It's all the Jews' fault. Israel's responsible for the war in Iraq and the destabilization of Syria and the tyranny in Saudi Arabia and the 600,000 Arabs who were gassed to death and shot and killed by Assad. It's all the Jews' fault. And we're sorry. We apologize. We had nowhere to go, like you said. We have no connection to the land. It's all fabrication. Hitler killed us. We had no choice. Us white European colonialists, even though 1 out of 5 Israelis is black, by the way. I took the Reverend Al Sharpton to Israel right after, and he sees these big, giant, strong black soldiers. He said, are these like African mercenaries? I said, Raval, I call Sharpton Raval. I said, Raval, they're black Ethiopian Jews. He said, really? How many? I said, they're 1/5 of Israel. he blew his mind. Okay. But he thought we had brought like black mercenary African soldiers to be his bodyguards while he was in Israel. You saw that we lost a black Ethiopian soldier last week in Israel. And by the way, they're all religious. They all wear kippot. It's incredible. Very religious community. They're all Orthodox. So I said to Cenk Uygur, we're sorry. Yeah, we had nowhere to go. We invented this history. Yasser Arafat said there was never a temple on the Temple Mount. You caught us. You caught us in the big lie. And I said, I'll tell you what. I know Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. Florida's a big state. Still mostly empty, even though there's like 23 million. Big state. I mean, Wyoming's completely empty. Vermont Bernie keeps on being elected Senate. There's like 2 people who live in Vermont. Vermont has 700,000 people. Okay? I spoke to Ron DeSantis. He's going to agree to take the 6 million Jews of Israel to the paradise of Florida. So Israel will end, God forbid, not through any terrible attack, and not through any terrible destruction, and not through any war, peacefully, for a much better life, easier economy. You know, my kids order from Amazon, they wait 2 weeks, okay? We're going to get Amazon Prime, all the Jews with all the Israelis delivered. Not even 24 hours, like same day, right? Soon it'll be drones, like within minutes. How long do you have to wait here? Oh, then I'm not moving here, forget it. Amazon Prime determines my homeland. No, that's like... So I said, we're going to close Israel down, and we're going to move all the 6 million Jews of Israel, which represent 49. Israel almost has a majority of Israel. It's not yet. We're at 48, 49% as of this Yom Ha'atzmaut. When Israel crosses the 50%, by the way, it'll be the first time since the Second Temple. It's more than American Jewry, but it hasn't crossed it yet. It's almost there. 48, 49%. Very close. Because there's a nevuah when the majority of their Mashiach will come, God willing. So my son Mendy keeps a very close eye on this. He was telling me the other day. Okay. And we shut Israel down. And we're sorry. You know, we apologize. And now, I said, now what happens? No Israel. Now what happens? Palestinian girls, 16 years old with boyfriends, will still be killed by their brothers for dishonoring the family. Hamas will immediately take over, or Mahmoud Abbas, the rest of Israel, and immediately start shooting, slaughtering, murdering anyone who challenges their hegemony. Editors who say one bad thing about even the moderate Mahmoud Abbas will be put in jail and tortured. The Arab leaders will continue to rip off every last penny of... Do you know that the Palestinians of Gaza received triple, prorated for modern dollars, triple the Marshall Plan? Europe was a hovel after the Second World War. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Germany and Britain and Belgium and Holland. The Palestinians got triple that per capita. You know where it went? No, let's start with Ismail Haniyeh's worth $7 billion. Yasser Arafat's daughter, she's 22, she just hit the Forbes 400 list. His daughter, Sua Arafat, his widow, lives in the penthouse of the Ritz of the Ritz in Paris. So the first thing is it's going to be stolen by all the leaders. Then whatever trickles down will be for the terrorist state. I said, let's go on. Will it lead to one major academic university? Of course not. Will it lead to any kind of freedom? Nothing. More bribes. The Emir of Qatar just bribed the United States today by giving us Air Force One, a new 747. What the hell? We are now taking gifts from the frickin' Emir of Qatar, one of the biggest funders of terrorism. By the way, he owns the whole world by now. I wonder how much of Hawaii he owns. If Israel disappears tomorrow, God forbid, this was my argument. What changes? There isn't one Arab democracy. There are no human rights. Gays will still be hung from cranes in Iran. Women in Iran will still be killed for showing this much hair. Nothing changes. What the hell is wrong with you, Jake? Nothing. Nothing changes. Which is why I don't believe that Israel is only the eternal and ancient Jewish homeland, which it is. Israel is the great Arab hope. Because the Arab argument as to why everybody is stealing all the money and all the oligarchs and all the oppression and all the religious persecution and all the secret police, the argument is, Shmuley, President Trump, President Biden, don't expect us to democratize. This isn't Kansas. This isn't Hawaii. This is the Middle East, a tough neighborhood. But then you have this tiny little country that pulled all those things off, thereby proving that their arguments are a bunch of BS. If Israel ceased to exist tomorrow, God forbid, the Arab world would tragically remain the same sewer that it is today, even though it was once the world's greatest civilization. Arabs introduced the very first rights for women to inherit. Arabs introduced, as I said, all the Greek philosophers, the first great universities. Arabs introduced, they had medical breakthroughs in Andalusia, in Spain, that are used till today in things like surgery. Where do you see any of that? Israel is the great Arab hope. But only if we can reclaim. So what is Israel? If there's the masculine and the feminine, Israel is the beat-up wife of all the neighbors that surround it. They see this nation that just wants to be a little bit feminine. It took in 800,000 Jews from all over the world. It was the first country ever where blacks came into freedom. Operation Moses, Operation Solomon. It's the only place that women have full rights. It's the only place where an Arab judge can put an Iranian Israeli president. I'm half Persian. We were so proud of Moshe Katsav. An Arab judge put him in jail for rape. You desecrate a woman in Israel, you could be the president. You go to frickin' jail. In Gaza, you become a hero forever if you rape a woman. But if you're the president of Israel, and it was never even fully proven, he went to jail. Israel is the beat-up woman, the beat-up wife, the battered wife in the Middle East. And we put up our dukes just to defend ourselves. But we really want to go back to what we are, people of the book. Not the people of the M16, not the people of the Uzi, not the people of the Merkava 4, not the people of the F-35. That's why Israel has so many Nobel Prizes. It's not because we're smarter than anyone. It's because that's where we really endeavor. That's what we really care about. But we're forced to fight. We want to live Shabbos, and they make us live Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. We want Shabbos. They won't let us. We want Sukkot. Notice they attacked us on Sukkot. Notice in 1973, they attacked us on Yom Kippur, the most feminine of days, where we don't even eat, where there's no competitiveness. So my friends, notice something about the world. This camera and all the technology around you, AI. By the way, the Pope gave his homily today and he said the number one threat to the world was AI. Okay, God bless Pope Leo. I don't know if I would necessarily say that AI is the number one threat in the world. I think Hamas might be a little bit more dangerous. I never pulled up ChatGPT on my phone and said, oh my God, I better run. But I have had some Islamists who've attacked me and I've thought to myself, I better run or something. But anyway, all computers work on lines, on ones and zeros. Okay? Binary opposites of ones and zeros. That's how all computing works. The entire world is the masculine, anatomically the masculine, and then the feminine. All studies show that men talk about 5 subjects. 2 guys get together. All the women here should know this. I know it's Mother's Day. Let's talk about the guys for a second. Because I told my wife, all Mother's Day is the appetizer for the main course of Father's Day. So, and I want to thank my wife on Mother's Day for facilitating my being such an incredible parent, which is what Mother's Day is all about. So let's just talk for a second. What are the 5 subjects that men always discuss?
You asking?
Yeah.
Sports.
Number 2 is sports. It's number 1. Money. Abstinence. What the hell? Are you a Catholic priest? Like, what the hell? Maybe I talked about Catholicism too much today. Okay, maybe I was in the Vatican for too long. Okay, the number 1 issue that men talk about is money. Notice that money is a line. It's a graph. It goes up and down. Lately with Trump's tariffs, it's going down. Hopefully it'll come back. Okay, that's number 1. What's the second most discussed male subject? Sports. Yeah. All lines. Baseball bats, hockey pucks, the gridiron on the football field. Again, it's about who's up, who's down. What's the third most talked about male subject?
Sex? Women?
Women. But, women are a circle, I said before. No, they're not. Not to men. To a man, they're 36, 24, 36. There are dimensions and it's amazing that men can actually mathematicize women. And women are dumb enough to buy that in terms of standards of beauty. That's for another lecture. What's the 4th most talked about male subject? I'm showing you that they're all very linear, right? 4th most talked, politics. Oh. Politics is all linear, right? Who's up, who's down, polls. And the 5th, who said cars? Cars. Do you believe that? The 5th is cars. And by the way, it's very interesting. There was a story today. poor Elon Musk. I happen to like Elon Musk. When he was accused of anti-Semitism, he actually asked me to be the guy to interview him on his X Space. You could listen to it. He wears dog tags of hostages every day. In any event, but there is too much a sewer of anti-Semitism on X. That's really, and believe me, I know. Okay. But poor Elon Musk, they had this Cybertruck and it wasn't selling. They only sold 50,000 so far. So just now they made it look like a truck pulling like a Airstream full of mud. Just before, it was too feminine. Now it's got torque and they had to masculinize that weird truck. Okay. Do you know what are the two most spoken about female subjects? One, relationships, circles of intimacy. And second, and I see this a lot in marital counseling because, I do a lot of marital counseling, shopping, things like that, circles of acquisition. Very often, if a woman feels very dissatisfied in a relationship, a man thinks that he can just buy her off, hey, go spend money, even if I ignore you, never compliment you. That's why Mother's Day is actually a very special day. But the Rebbe said that every day should be Mother's Day. We should be nurturing the feminine every day. But the point is, the one and the zero, the masculine and the feminine are supposed to coexist side by side. That gives us perfection, 10. In every culture, everywhere in the world, 10 represents perfection, especially in Hasidus and Kabbalah. But you'll notice they really don't exist side by side. In the moment of union, what Hindus call Jivan Mukta, what we Jews call Yichud Zun, which we say every night for Sfiras Omer, when the masculine and the feminine come together, when they come together to create life, like in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, one of my favorite biblical verses. Al ken yazerv ish is abi ve'es imo, v'davak v'ishto v'hayu levasarecha. Therefore shall a man leave his father and leave his mother. He shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh. 1 + 1 = 1. Fascinating mathematics, very mystical, very Kabbalistic. Notice that they don't exist side by side. I'm not going to do any kind of gesticulation here, but the masculine is enveloped by the feminine. The feminine is superior. That's why, as Rabbi Michal, who's a great scholar of Chassidus and Jewish mysticism, will be able to tell you in any lectures that follow, which I'll be checking to make sure that they are doctrinally acceptable. You'll notice that in Chassidus, the Messianic era is always about the triumph of the feminine, not the masculine. The greatest Kabbalist that ever lived, to whom Madonna dedicated a whole song, Rabbi Isaac Luria, he was called the Iyar, the lion, lived in the 15th century. He famously said that Mashiach would not come until husbands began to obey their wives. Which means he'll never come. God forbid. There, you finally got your apikourses from me. And that was the ancient messianic prophecy, that the Messiah would come at a time when Isha tisoviv gever, when women would become dominant. Well, not women necessarily. It could be men who just are prepared to be more vulnerable. You know what the number one complaint wives have against their husbands is in all marital counseling? He never talks to me about his feelings. How are you? Okay. What'd you do today? Not much. You happy? Yeah, I guess. and on it goes. Isha Tesoviv Gover, the feminine would be predominant. And now you understand why. My favorite Haftorah of the year, we just said it, on the 8th day. The 8th day of Passover is the Messianic day. 8 represents transcending nature. God creates the world in 7 days. 8 is a very mystical number. The 8 days of Hanukkah, miracles happen outside of nature. We read a Haftorah from Isaiah chapter 11, which is my favorite of the year. And I named my book after it, The Wolf Shall Lie with the Lamb. All the great Messianic prophecies. There are Messianic prophecies sprinkled throughout the Bible. My Christian brothers and sisters know them far better than us Jews. I debate them all the time. My friend Michael Brown, etc. Genesis 24, Isaiah 30, Jeremiah 31, Isaiah 53. But the most famous is in Isaiah chapter 11. The wolf shall lie with the lamb. Men will beat their swords into plowshares. Think about that. Men will beat their swords. Lions will become circles. The rigidity of life, this inability to be expressive, to show emotion. Men who can't commit, who date women who never, there'll be a vulnerability. Show me one of our Muslim leaders who shows that vulnerability. And by the way, it's very interesting to me that right after President Trump, who is, listen, on the one hand, I cannot thank President Trump enough for being the greatest friend that Israel has ever had in the Oval Office. No one comes close. On the other hand, not everything he does is necessarily in accordance with Jewish values. That's okay. Probably not everything that I do is always in accordance with Jewish values. But I will say, he really does believe in showing rigidity and being very strong, etc. But not when he was shot in the ear. There was a period of like a week or two that you saw a different Trump completely. Do you remember that at the Republican convention was 4 days after he was shot? Do you remember he was suddenly, for the first time ever, he was bouncing his grandchildren on his knee. He never wanted to be seen as a grandchild. He's going to turn 80 next year. His birthday, his 79th birthday is in a week or so. I doubt they're even going to, he doesn't want to be seen as a grandfather. But this was different. There was a vulnerability to him. And he spoke about unity, etc. Even he kind of understands. He just feels everyone's after me, so I got to fight. My friends, October 7th was all about the desecration of the feminine. Israel is the feminine. It embraces the masculine because it's forced to, but we really want to beat our swords into plowshares. That's why the Lubavitcher Rebbe and me and Hale were discussing this the other night. The Rebbe showed both sides. The Rebbe was profoundly feminine, meaning the Rebbe raised students. The Rebbe spread love. The Rebbe said to bring Mashiach one good deed. That's a profoundly nurturing message. But he also said that Israel should never give up an inch of land. Not an inch, not a granule, In the 1973 war, the Rebbe castigated Israel publicly. Why did you stop Ariel Sharon from conquering Cairo? You were 101 kilometers. That's like a 2-hour drive. And that would have sent a signal to our Muslim brothers and sisters that you will forever lose militarily. Learn to frickin' negotiate. Stop with all these threats of blood and murder and killing. And then the Rebbe said the same thing about Damascus. He said that Israel should conquer Damascus. Israel was 37 kilometers from Damascus. Only when militarism, only when the sword is beaten to a plowshare, only when militarism is completely destroyed can the feminine finally triumph. I'll give you an example. I'm shocked, and I'm going to end now, it's getting late. I'm shocked that we barely commemorated the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. May 8th. What's today's date? 3 days ago. Nobody even cared. And especially here in Hawaii. Now, the war didn't start in Hawaii. The war started on the 1st of September 1939 in Poland, when Germany invaded. But America's involvement started here in Hawaii. 450,000 American soldiers gave their lives. Nobody gave a damn. May 8th passed and no one mourned them. No one cared. It really broke my heart. For us Jews, it was the end of the Holocaust. It's a very sad day. Did you notice, so an extraordinary thing happened in Casablanca in 1943. It was the first meeting, it was the meeting that Roosevelt and Churchill had as they were going to Tehran to meet Stalin for the first time. Churchill had met Stalin already, but it was Roosevelt's first meeting with Stalin. And it took place in Tehran, of all places, right? But in Casablanca, Churchill and Roosevelt met in order to get on the same page. What is their negotiating stance with Stalin, with Uncle Joe? Roosevelt gets there first, and he calls a press conference. And he announces, our demand of Germany is unconditional surrender. Churchill freaked out. Churchill arrives and says, first of all, you got to consult your allies. Secondly, he says, that's the craziest thing ever. If you demand unconditional surrender of an enemy, then they will fight to the last man. You have to give them some out. But Roosevelt was a genius. Roosevelt understood, why was there a Second World War? There was a Second World War because in the First World War, the Germans surrendered on November 11th, which today is Veterans Day, and then there was the myth of the stab in the back. They really shouldn't have surrendered. The military was intact, they could have won. Only Roosevelt understood the masculine has to be completely wiped out, the militarism, by the feminine, by the democracies. They have to destroy the idea of militarism. Even Churchill didn't get it. And sure enough, that's what happened. Many more people died. The war dragged out until the 8th of November, 1945. Hitler blew his brains out 80 years ago, April 30th. Third Reich continued for another 8 days under Admiral Karl Donitz. But that was the end of Nazism. My close friend Ron Dermer, who's Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister, he met with President Trump on Thursday. So he told me an incredible story. President Biden, God bless him, came to Israel 4 days after October 7th. That was a great sign of friendship with the Jewish people. And while many of us have our issues with President Biden, and I do, I'll never forget that he did, for the most part, arm Israel through a difficult year when a lot of people in his party who were turning against Israel pressured him not to. And I give him credit for that. But he flew to Israel, and that was a beautiful sign of... So Ron Dermer is sitting with Bibi Netanyahu and President Biden and a bunch of other people. By the way, Bob Woodward later told this story. I don't know how he got it. I was not the source in his recent book. So Biden says to Bibi, why are you calling for the complete destruction of Hamas? You can't destroy Hamas. And then Bibi says to Biden, but why not? Why would you think that, Mr. President? So Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, third Jewish Secretary of State, we had Kissinger, we had Madeleine Albright, who denied her Jewishness until it was outed by the Washington Post, and then Tony Blinken, both of whose parents are Jewish. And his stepfather was a world-famous Holocaust survivor named Samuel Pisar. Tony Blinken says, what do you mean, Ron? The president's right. You can't destroy an idea. Hamas is an idea. Islamism is an idea. The Muslim Brotherhood is an idea. And then Ron Dermer, being very smart, says to President Biden and Anthony Blinken, he says, you can't destroy an idea, but you can destroy the ability of an idea to organize. There are plenty of Nazis in the world, but they can't get organized. There will be Hamas people. But because Roosevelt insisted on the total and complete destruction, that sword was beat into a plowshare. The masculine was completely decimated by the democracies, by the free peoples of the world. So the Germans concluded that was the end of German militarism. Do you understand that German was the Teutonic Knights? Militarism was everything to them for 1,000 years, and then in one war, goodbye. It was obliterated. And that's why Israel has to destroy Hamas to the last fighter, to the last man. We're in a terrible quandary right now. We have probably 24 living hostages. And we don't know what to do because we Jews value life so much, and Hamas knows that. By the way, this is public, so I'm not revealing anything. Ron Dermer has been Bibi's right-hand man for 20 years before he became prime minister. And he told me they only ever had 2 disagreements, but one of them was when Bibi released 1,000 hostages for Gilad Shalit. God forbid, yes. Thank you. That was a test. You passed, Nicole. That was to see if you were listening. 1,000 terrorists, among which was Yahya Sinwar, of course, right? My friends, do I want my son in war right now? No. If Bibi, who I've known for 36 years, I started hosting Bibi at Oxford when he was still single, before he married Sarah. I've been close to him for 36 years. I love him. If he came to me today and said, Shmuley, should I continue the war in Gaza? I would say, of course not, Prime Minister. And you know why? Because my sons are fighting it. I don't want them at war. That's why you don't always ask the parents of soldiers. Because I'm going to look at it in a very myopic perspective. I don't want my sons at war. But is it better for the country? We don't know what to do. Because the hostages are right. They have to be released. The families are right. But on the other hand, where did Islamism arise in the first place? It came from someone named Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. He took 55 hostages in our embassy, and the West in America has been held hostage ever since. And the Islamists have learned that's the West see, they have no value for life, right? The Islamists, not Islam. Islam's a great world religion. Islamism is not Islam. Never confuse the two. They have contempt for life. They kill their own people. Assad killed 600,000 Arabs and nobody gave a frickin' damn. I, as a Jew, raised $100,000 to do a full page ad of the New York Times to stop the crematoria that Assad built where he was burning 35,000 bodies. The Jews spoke out against the murder of the Arabs in Syria, not any Islamic nations. Nobody gave a damn. But what do? We have all these hostages. And we're being held hostage. But that's what started the whole thing in the first place, where America allowed Khomeini and Iran to take over the world. And look what's happening today. So I'm not going to give an opinion on that because I have no right to. I don't have a child who's in Gaza, God forbid. If I did, I would be on a hunger strike outside Netanyahu's door to get them released. But I know one thing. Israel has got to destroy Hamas completely and utterly so that the idea of militarism. And let me finally say, there's a role for the masculine, there's a role for the feminine. But the feminine will ultimately triumph. Isn't that what we tell men who womanize, etc., that, yeah, you think that that's life. No, it's not. The beauty of one woman, intimacy, bone of one bone, flesh of one flesh. You think you're having a blast. You're not. You don't know what love is. Even great sex, you don't know what it is until you know how to forego all of the inhibitions that we have when we get physically naked, but we're not emotionally naked. The world needs to embrace the feminine. By the way, that's why all of you should come to shul on Shabbat. You have to celebrate Shabbos. You have to drive less on Shabbos, watch less TV on Shabbos. You have to nurture the feminine within you. You need to give your marriages a chance to heal. By the way, I actually believe that the shul really is a club for men and women. I want to see more women coming. That's a good thing. A lot of people decry it, saying, L'chaim, it's a great thing for men to come together not as competitors, but as worshipers, as people of faith. So, we'll end with a prayer. God willing, may God protect the greatest Jews of modern times, the soldiers of the IDF, who are the hero of all heroes, the fighter of all fighters, the champion of all champions. I am in awe of the IDF. I have shivers down my spine even saying it right now. Seeing my sons, I begged my son, he thought I was crazy. When my son Yosef got married in the middle of the war, again, he's an elite fighter, I begged him to wear his army uniform at his wedding. He said, Tata, you lost the plot. And he wore a kapata. He wore a Chabad family. He wore what Rabbi Michal wears. But he thought I was crazy. I mentioned to him at Pesach, I said, I really still wish. He said, Tati, you're still crazy. Okay. And I wanted my daughter-in-law to wear her green IDF uniform instead of a white dress. The IDF, oh my God, the first Jewish army in 2,000 years. Oh. And what do they fight for? For life. Everyone told me when I arrived for my son's wedding right after October 7th, it was impossible to even get to Israel. We got to Israel, had the wedding. Everyone said to me, be careful, the real danger is going to come from Israel's 1.9 million Muslim citizens. They're going to rise up to, never happened. Because Israel's Arabs understand, they'll complain. IDF was protected. These stupid missiles, they go in their towns. It kills them. Many Muslims died on October 7th. By the way, we went to Alumim, where they took the Thai workers who were Buddhist, and they decapitated them with hose. They were growing pumpkins and lettuce. And I was there 4 days afterward. God bless the IDF. God bless the hostages. We need to get them back. But we also cannot allow that to stop a war that will destroy Hamas once and for all, and Hezbollah. And finally, President Trump follows everything I do on social media. He's always watching me, he's always following me. Mr. President, may I speak to you directly? I was introduced by Rabbi Michal Goldman as controversial. It's not easy to not be controversial if you want to get things done. And you're a controversial president, and yet you're one of the most consequential presidents in American history. Mr. President, I know that you're an isolationist. I know you don't want to see more war. Neither do I. How many American men and women died in Iraq, which today is controlled by Iran? It's just a vassal state of Iran. How did that happen? How many died in Afghanistan, which is controlled by the Taliban? I mean, we blew those wars. Terrible. But Mr. President, Iran is a threat to the world. You can negotiate from now until kingdom come. They're liars. You're a brilliant negotiator. You're a brilliant businessman. How do you negotiate with someone whose word is worthless? Unless we take out militarily, and I'm not here to promote war, God forbid. I don't want boots on the ground. Unless we have the technology to destroy all of Iran's nuclear abilities so that Khamenei, who yesterday sanctioned tens of thousands of people screaming death to America so they don't hit the great Satan, let alone the little Satan, Israel. They're after America. Iran, 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 Iran. It's all Iran. And I'm ashamed to say it because my family lived in Iran for 2,500 years, since the destruction of the first temple. So I conclude with just a little story, my friends. And thank you very much for your patience today. Tiny little story, and we're done. It's only going to take about 2 hours. It's about my childhood. Because I talked about Israel, I'd like to talk about myself for about 2 hours now. It's because it's my favorite subject. That's the only reason. Let me just conclude by telling you this little story. It's a true story. the Rebbe sent me to, Rabbi Michal mentioned that I was the Rebbe's emissary at Oxford. So it was a Sunday afternoon, like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I was in my office at Carfax, which is the ancient Oxford City Center. And the student calls me and he says to me, you're the rabbi? Yes, I'm the rabbi. I said, I'm at Oxford. There's really no such thing as Oxford University. It's really 35 different colleges, which have this overarching intercollegiate thing called, but really it's 35 colleges. One of the most prestigious is Magdalen, Mary Magdalene, but they call it Magdalen. So he said to me, I'm at Malden, I'm running to see you. So I said, I'm leaving. He said, no, it's an emergency. He comes huffing and puffing at my door 15 minutes later, and he says to me, you're a rabbi. I said, yeah. He said, you're religious. I said, sometimes, yeah. He said, you're Jewish. I said, that kind of follows, yeah. He said, well, last night I discovered I'm Jewish too. I said, how did you discover you're Jewish? He said, well, Oxford doesn't have chaplains. Everything in Oxford has a fancy name. So they have the Doctor of Divinity. Every college has its Doctor of Divinity. So the Doctor of Divinity gave a speech Saturday night about religion, and he said, by the way, the Jews believe in the maternal line. So if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. He said, my father's Jewish. My father's not Jewish. My mother's Jewish. I wasn't raised with anything. I never considered myself Jewish. I said, okay, so I'm not following. He said, I now discovered, therefore, I'm Jewish. I said, yeah. He said, I don't want to be Jewish. And it's 5:15. I really want to go home. And so I said to him, look, speak to your mother. I had nothing to do with this. This really is not my fault. So he says, you cannot co-opt me into a group that I want to be a part of. I said, so forget about us. like, you called me. He said, no, he said it physically bothers me that I said, but there's nothing I can do about it. Once you're Jewish, all the holy water in the world, you can never escape it. You're cursed. Just forever. Everyone's going to hate you, and you're going to have to have security outside your house. You're going to have to move the mezuzah indoors. And this is before Israel was so hated. Or as hated, I should say. It was hated back then too, but as hated. But he's very smart. He says to me, but I researched this. He said, I found on the internet that there is something you can do. You can excommunicate me. And I said to him, what the hell? What are you talking about? I can't excommunicate you. He said, yeah, you can excommunicate me. I said, listen. He said, it's getting late. I said, my wife is home, waiting for me. I said, listen, no Jew has been excommunicated since Benedict Spinoza, Baruch di Spinoza, one of the greatest philosophers ever. He was excommunicated in 1648. Until today, David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, tried so hard 300 years later to reverse the excommunication. We don't really excommunicate a lot of people, so I just can't. He said, well, I'm not leaving. I'll like to have a hunger strike in your office. I'm not leaving until you excommunicate me. I said, okay, there is a little loophole. I said, I said, look, we rabbis, we charge 100 pounds for circumcisions, 200 pounds for bar mitzvahs, 300 pounds, this is pounds sterling, of course, 300 pounds for weddings, and 400 pounds for excommunications. And he says, why so steep? Why so much? I said, because it costs more to get out than it does to get in. And he looks at me and says, if 400 pounds is a lot of money, he said, do you have perhaps like a student discount? So I say to him, no student discount. I said, tomorrow everyone will hear I gave you a special deal. Every Jew in Oxford's going to want to be excommunicated. No. I said, I'll maybe throw in like free circumcision for your firstborn child or something like that. Some package deal, but no. And my friends, I took my computer and I typed out Apple laser printers were a new thing at the time. I typed out, I Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, hereby excommunicate you and all your progeny. From here, forevermore, Kushan Tachas, which is Latin for God bless you. Not exactly. Okay, Rabbi Michal will translate that on Shabbat sometime. It's kind of like kiss my derriere. Like, in other words, this entire thing is not really valid. Okay. And I hand him this worthless piece of paper and I say, I'm going home. Okay. And before he leaves, I say to him, as he's walking out, like all happy, he's excommunicated. I say to him, just before you go, you do owe me. I didn't even charge you. I said, I excommunicated you for free. This is like the bargain of a lifetime. I said, but you owe me one answer to one question. And he's not stupid. He said, I know the question. I said, of course you know the question. So it's an obvious question. Why? You found out last night you were Jewish. Why did it bother you so much? Why did it bother you so much that you're a Jew? What do you care? Why did you ruin my Sunday by having to run breathless to be excommunicated? And then he looked back at me and said to me, you're a silly, foolish man, Rabbi. He said, that question, the answer is self-evident. It's obvious. Why don't I want to be Jewish? He said, I'm a historian. I study history here at Oxford. And I've always studied how the Romans ruled, how the Aztecs built, how the Greeks philosophized, and how the Jews died, and died, and died. And you're asking me why I don't want to be part of a nation that is always massacred, that is always hated, and always dies. And I had a premonition, honestly, that I would never see this student again, and I never did. Interestingly, I met his mother. She was a literary agent, and I write books. There was a book party that I went to, and I met his mother, and she told me the story she heard from, but I never, maybe I'll see him someday, but I never met him again. And I had a premonition I'd never see him. So I had to say something from the heart that would stay with him. And I looked at him and I said to him, you're right. You are right. You're a historian. I also love history. I've also read. The Romans ruled. The Aztecs, the Incas, they built. The Greeks, they philosophized. And the Jews died. And yet, when you wanted to meet a Jew today, all you had to do was pick up the damn phone. If you want to meet an Inca, you can't. No one on the other line. You want to call the Aztecs? You're not even going to get the answering machine. You want to call ancient Roman Empire? Dissolve. Goodbye. But for a Jew, you picked up the damn phone because they're all gone and we are still here. I have no fear for the future of our people. We'll always be around. I just don't want any more casualties, my friends. I don't want to see any more dead IDF soldiers, God forbid. I don't want to see Lee and Kathy's son in danger, God forbid. I don't want to see our sons in danger. Your son, congratulations, is about to get his law degree. Those are two incredible things, right? The masculine and the feminine. That he puts on the olive green uniform, he goes out to fight to protect life, but then he's back to what we Jews do best, which is to study and to preserve law. And by the way, without divulging anything personal, there are probably more than one person in this room who are Jews by choice. I want you to know the two groups of people that I respect most in my community worldwide are A, IDF soldiers, who are the hero of all heroes, and B, Jews by choice, people who are actually crazy enough to want to be part of this incredible nation, the most influential of all time, but the most hated and the most persecuted, but the most invincible, the most indefatigable, and the most eternal. Thank you very much.
Wait a